In this tutorial, I will show you how to create an orange. We're going to learn about soft selection today as well as bump mapping to create this orange. So I want to start with a sphere. So I'm going to create a sphere and I'm going to make it quite a bit bigger than I need to. I can always shrink it down later. But I have my sphere here. And I'm going to keep everything else the same on the sphere, so I'm not going to mess around with any of the subdivisions or anything. I think that'll work pretty well for what we have. Now, I am going to right click, hold down on the sphere and choose vertex so that I get the vertices instead of the total object. And with this, normally if I click on a vertex and I change it with just the normal move tool or rotate tool or select tool, that is just moving that single vertex or face or edge or whatever I currently have selected. So I want to be able to put the dimple in the top of the orange, but if I do this, that looks more like the Death Star than it would in orange. So I want to do a soft selection. That'll let me choose more of the vertices just by selecting a single one. So the way I get to that is I can double click on the move tool, which gives me my tool settings for the move tool, and down here I'll twirly down on soft selection and turn on soft select. So now you can see that depending on where and as I move my mouse, it changes too. What I'm doing is whatever vertex I select, it also selects vertices around it. And the brighter the color is, the bright orange represents things that'll move much closer to the thing I'm moving. And as it gets further away from that center, the objects will move less and less. So let me show you how this is going to work. I'll click on this top one, and I'm going to set my fall off radius here. Yours was probably defaulting to a bigger number. And I can slide this slider, and you can see as I slide this, the color increases around. And that will show you what other vertices are being moved along with this, and also the relative strength with which they're being moved. So I've set this to 3.3, and if I move this down now, just this single vertex, all of the other vertexes will move along with it. And as you can see, as it gets further away from that center one that I clicked on, these ones aren't moving quite as much. And so I can create an orange that's not as round. And I'm going to turn this down quite a bit. I'm going to turn the fall off radius down to like 1 because I want to create that dimple, and a 1 will give me just these vertices around here and a little bit of these ones. So if I turn it down there, then I get a much better effect on that. And so I can do this throughout to create my orange. I want to do the same thing on the bottom so that I don't have it as a perfect circle because oranges aren't quite that way. So I'm going to click down there, and that's not enough soft selection, so I'm going to turn off fall off. Just means that it gradually gets weaker as it gets further away. We'll talk about the same thing when we talk about lighting. Also has a fall off. So depending on what number I click, or I can just slide the slider, it will affect more or less of those. So now it kind of looks like an apple now, but I'm going to add some. I don't want it to be consistently round all the way around, so I'm just going to kind of randomly pick a couple of places. So I'm holding down Shift to select multiple vertices, and you can see that even as I select those multiple vertices, they still fall off. So this one is going to move the most, and these ones are going to move less and less. And the same thing applies for if I rotate it or if I scale it. So I'll press R to scale, and I'm going to scale these. Maybe, let's see what looks better. If I scale them in, they'll scale proportional. I kind of just want to have it be not perfectly round. And that looks pretty good. So you can adjust it a little bit, and with the soft selection it's much easier than if it was off and I just picked that one. I'd have to hold down Shift and select multiple ones and do it all individually. So soft select can be really useful for this purpose. So I'm going to do some more moves and just try to get this to look a little bit more orangish, maybe a little bit of a dimple underneath as well. So I'll turn down the radius a little bit again. Click on that. 1 seemed to work well for me before, and I'll give it a little bit of dimple there, and I should be good. So I'm going to turn off soft select and then exit out of the tool settings, and I can always get back in there if I want. And I'll go back to object mode by right-clicking on the orange and selecting it. Now I need to put a material on it. And in Photoshop, I took some orange and some different shades of orange, and I created my own texture, which I saved as a JPEG in my projects folder. So I should be able to use this on the material. I didn't want it to be a solid block of orange, so I tried to introduce a little bit of darker and lighter splotchiness so that it looked more like an actual orange peel. We'll see how well that works. So I'm going to come in here and choose my perspective, whoops, wrong one, perspective, hypershade perspective. And now I want to decide what kind of material I want. I want it to be shiny, and so I'm probably not going to go with a Lambert. I'm going to try, let's try a Blinn. So I need to create a new material, and then there's a lot of ways that I can put that material on here. I can right-click on the apple to do it. I can select the apple and right-click on this and assign the material. I can even middle mouse click and drag it onto there. I'll double-click on the Blinn. And sorry, I don't have a lot of space on my screen here. I'll call this, instead of Blinn 2, I'm going to call it Orange. And for the color, Orange 1. For the color, I could just pick a solid orange color, but I don't think that'll look as good as using my texture. So I will click this node here, the checkerboard at the end, and I want to choose File. And the file that I want to choose is that one that I've created. So I'm going to use Orange Skin as my file. Now if I render this, it's going to look, well, I'll just show you. So that's my orange. It looks more like a Christmas ornament. The Blinn is just too shiny right now, so I'm going to have to make some changes to the Blinn. This really bright reflection of the light is called a specular highlight. And so I have too much of that. I'm going to come into the attributes for my Blinn here and see if I can turn that down. And under specular shading, I have reflectivity. It's at 0.5 right now. If I turn that way down, I still want it to be a little shiny. So if I turn that down a lot and then render this, I think it'll turn out a lot better. Yeah, that's looking a lot more like what I want it to. Now, the real problem that I have is that it is too round. Orange peels have a texture, a bumpiness to them that I need to recreate. And I'm going to use a bump map. Now, bump maps are black and white image maps that Maya will recognize. Anywhere where it's black, it's going to be pushed in. Anywhere where it's white, it's going to be kept the same. We can also reverse that, but it's more of an illusion. It doesn't actually change the geometry of this orange. So unlike a displacement map like we did with the environment where we were actually physically lifting up those faces and moving them, a bump map doesn't add geometry, it doesn't move it at all. And you see it a lot in video games and movies because it's a really efficient way of creating texture. So I'm going to go back into my orange here, and if I scroll down just from the top a little bit, underneath color, you'll see an option called bump mapping. And I want to create a new node for bump mapping. Now instead of using a file, I could just draw my own, but I want it to be more random. And the fractal is perfect for that. A fractal is a random mathematical assortment of black and white with grays that will go halfway. And when you select it for the first time, it makes your orange look terrible. So right now my orange looks like it's been left in the back seat of a car for a really long time. But you will see that under bump, right now I'm in the bump, that's what a fractal looks like. And I can change some of the settings for the fractal here. I can make the darker parts lighter. I can change how much of it is being affected. But instead of doing those, I'm going to, in the bump, just adjust the depth. So 0 bump depth would be not bumpy at all. Anything to the left of that or to the right, even just slightly, so if I just do like 0.05, and those numbers may be different depending on the size that you're working in, that should create a nice random bumpiness. So the fractal is really great for just random bumps. And then when I render this, that looks pretty good. And I could always go in and make the bumps smaller or bigger. I can adjust how that texture is placed on there, but that actually looks pretty great. Let me render it from a different angle here and see. I'm going to hit spacebar so that I can just see my perspective view. If you're not getting when you render quite what you think you're going to get, this button here is your film gate, and then the next one next to it is the resolution gate, and that shows you much more accurately. This is what you will actually see when you press a render. Yeah, and I like that. And the bump map is especially noticeable when there is a difference in light. So because we're getting some fall off from the brightest part to the darkest part of the orange, that's when it's especially noticeable, is when your lighting is set up correctly. So that looks great. I'm going to keep it just like that. Now the last part I need is a stem. And to create that stem, I am going to do some extrusions on a cylinder. So I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to bring it up here. I'm going to place it inside of there at the size that I want. And I may need to go to my 4 view to set it up correctly. With the 4 view, I can say, all right, the top, it's centered in the top just right. From the front view, I want it to be just a little bit taller. From the perspective, I want it to be a little bit thinner. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to extrude up the top, but the top currently has 20 different faces, and I don't want that many. So in my channel box over here with the cylinder selected in object mode, I'm going to go into my inputs and turn down how many subdivisions there are. I'm going to do 10 instead, which is going to be much sharper edged, but then I can smooth it at the end. Now I have less to click on. I'm going to right click on my cylinder, choose face, and hold down Shift and select all of these faces. So they all should be highlighted. And now I'm going to extrude it. And you can either come to Edit Mesh Extrude, or if you recognize the symbol, this button right here is the Extrude button. And when I click Extrude, it is going to basically stretch the faces I have selected out. So now if I click this blue line, I'm extruding out new faces off of that old geometry. And as I do that, I'm going to pull it out a little bit, but I'm also going to rotate it a little bit. So I went to rotate by pressing E, and I'm going to rotate those faces just a little bit, and then I'm going to press R for scale, and I'm going to scale it a little bit bigger as well. So I'm going to have my stem get bigger and rotate a little bit as I extrude. So then I can extrude again. So I did a little bit of changing. I'll choose extrude again, extrude it out in that direction, and then rotate it a little bit more and scale it a little bit more. And I can even use the move tool to move it where I want it to go. Then I'll choose extrude again, make it go out just a little bit more, rotate it just a little bit more, maybe even scale it just a little bit. And each time I extrude it just gives me a new set of geometry that I can rotate off of. And that's a pretty big stem, but it'll be okay. Now it's really because I turned down the number of subdivisions on it, it looks like a computer thing. And so I want to smooth this. If I have it selected, under Mesh, I can choose Smooth. And depending on how many divisions I do, I can basically subdivide it more and more to create a much smoother face. So now I have a stem that looks pretty good. And in my Hypershade, I'm going to create a new Lambert. I'll call this Lambert stem. And in this case, I'm just going to pick a brown color. So I'm going to click right on that gray box, turn it into a dark brown, and then drag that new stem onto, with the middle mouse, onto there. So now when I look at my orange, in fact, I'm going to come back in here, select them both, and I'm going to resize them a little bit. So with them both selected, I'm going to group them with Control G, and now they'll scale together. The weird thing about Control G is sometimes it moves the pivot, the center point, into a weird place. So if it does that, you can always come here to Modify and choose Center Pivot, which will recenter it. But now when I scale it, it should scale together, and I can get it the right scale, place it in the right location here. I'm going to go to my 4 view again to center, make sure it's on the table correctly, something like that. And now back in perspective, I'm going to do a new render of that, and we'll see how it looks. And in my render, because I have mental ray on, I'm even getting the shadow of the stem falling on the orange here. I'm getting some pretty nice shadowing on I did a glass MIA material on just a box here, and I'm getting some neat reflection and shadowing on that too. So I think it looks pretty great. And so make an orange, add it to your cereal box, your kitchen assignment, and that's that for bump mapping. We're going to do some more bump mapping with the floor next.